The night was vibrant in Barcelona. The illuminated streets reflected the glow of neon signs, and the city pulsed with energy. At the heart of this excitement, one of the most exclusive nightclubs was hosting a special event, a performance by a famous international singer. Among the guests was Dani Alves, accompanied by his wife, who had insisted they go out that night to enjoy a moment together, away from the pressures of daily life. Upon arriving at the club, the couple was warmly welcomed by the organizers. The venue was luxurious, decorated with intense lighting effects and a powerful sound system that made the floor vibrate to the rhythm of the music. People were dancing, toasting, and chatting excitedly. Dani, accustomed to the attention, greeted friends and acquaintances, while his wife held his hand, enjoying the relaxed atmosphere. They headed to a VIP area near the stage, where they had a privileged view of the show. Dani was a big fan of the artist and was excited to see the live performance. His wife, although not as passionate about the music, enjoyed the moment by his side, smiling as she watched his enthusiasm. Waiters passed by offering sophisticated drinks, and the music created an immersive atmosphere where everyone seemed lost in the pleasure of the night. However, amidst the excitement, something started to catch the attention of some people on the dance floor. A couple was arguing intensely, gesturing sharply and raising their voices. The woman, visibly upset, waved her hands as the man glared at her with an expression filled with anger. Nearby, another couple observed the scene, and the tension between the four seemed to escalate with each passing second. At first, Dani Alves noticed the commotion from afar, but didn't give it much thought. Arguments at parties like this weren't uncommon. However, something about the body language of those involved made him feel uneasy. He frowned and kept a watchful eye. His wife noticed his change in expression and asked if everything was okay. "It looks like there's an argument over there," he said, subtly nodding in the direction of the commotion. Before they could continue their conversation, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. The man arguing with his partner turned to the other couple and exchanged heated words with the other man. Within seconds, the argument exploded. Shoving, shouting, and attempts to break up the fight turned the dance floor into chaos. People hurriedly stepped back, some trying to intervene, while others just watched in shock. Then something happened that froze the scene for a moment. In the middle of the commotion, one of the women was struck on the head with a glass bottle. The sound of the glass shattering echoed through the venue, followed by a scream of pain. The crowd parted as the young woman collapsed to the floor, clutching her head, from which blood began to flow rapidly. Dani Alves reacted instantly. Without hesitation, he got up and ran toward the injured woman, passing through the security guards who were trying to control the situation. As he knelt beside her, he saw that her eyes were wide with panic, and her hands trembled as she pressed against the wound. "Hey, stay with me. We'll take care of this," he said, trying to calm her down. The young woman was breathing heavily, clearly frightened and in pain. Some people around them pulled out their phones, while others shouted for an ambulance. Dani looked around and realized that waiting for medical help could take too long. Time was crucial. That's when he made a decision. He would take her to the hospital himself. Without wasting any time, Dani Alves picked up the young woman in his arms. She was still pressing her head with her hand, and blood was seeping through her fingers. The commotion around them intensified, and some people tried to assist him, but he was determined to act fast. "Make way!" he shouted, his firm voice cutting through the noise of the music and the murmurs of the shocked crowd. The club's security guards quickly realized the severity of the situation and helped clear a path. Dani's wife, who had run after him, grabbed his arm for a moment, concerned. "Are you sure? The ambulance might already be on the way." "We can't wait," he replied, looking into her eyes. She saw the urgency and determination on his face and nodded, understanding that at that moment, there was no better choice. Dani hurried out of the nightclub, making his way through the hallway that led to the parking lot. The cool night air contrasted with the hot, crowded atmosphere of the club, but he barely noticed. His Ferrari was parked just a few meters away. When he reached the car, he quickly opened the passenger door and carefully placed the young woman inside. Her face was pale, and her eyes were blinking slowly, as if she were struggling to stay conscious. Hey, stay awake! What's your name? He asked, trying to keep her alert. Julia, she murmured weakly. Julia, hold on. We're getting out of here now. He shut the door, rushed to the driver's side, and jumped in. With a quick turn of the key, the engine roared to life, and he sped off through the streets of Barcelona. The city was still buzzing, but he drove skillfully, weaving through traffic and accelerating whenever possible. In the passenger seat, Julia tried to keep her eyes open, but her breathing was uneven. Danny felt the adrenaline surging through him. He had experienced many tense moments on the field, but this was different. There were no rules or time to think, just the urgency of getting her to safety. Stay with me, we're almost there, he said, glancing at her briefly. The traffic lights flashed past like streaks of color as the Ferrari raced through the streets. He knew exactly where the nearest hospital was and mentally mapped out the fastest route. The car's phone rang, and his wife's voice came through the speaker. Danny, are you close? How is she? We're almost there, but she's lost a lot of blood. Meet me at the hospital. In the distance, he heard the wail of a police siren, but he didn't slow down. He couldn't afford to be stopped now. A few minutes later, the hospital came into view. Without worrying about parking properly, he pulled up at the emergency entrance and jumped out of the car. I need help here, he shouted, carrying Julia in his arms. Nurses rushed over with a stretcher. As soon as they placed her on it, they began administering first aid. What happened? One of the doctors asked. She was hit on the head with a glass bottle, lost a lot of blood, and was starting to lose consciousness. The medical team immediately sprang into action, rushing Julia inside. Danny stood still for a moment, taking a deep breath as he watched the doors swing shut behind them. Only then did he notice his own hands, stained with blood. His heart was still racing. He glanced at his car and saw the passenger seat smeared with red. None of that mattered. What mattered was that he had gotten her there in time. Seconds later, his wife arrived, running toward him. Are you okay? He nodded, still processing everything that had just happened. I think so. I just hope she'll be okay too. Danny Alves remained in the hospital waiting room, watching closely as doctors and nurses moved quickly through the hallways. The muffled sound of hurried footsteps and serious conversations created a tense atmosphere. He could still feel the adrenaline coursing through his body, but now it was mixed with concern. His wife approached him and took his hand. You did the right thing. You brought her here quickly, and that might have saved her life. He nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on the door where Julia had been taken. The image of the young woman bleeding in his car was still vivid in his mind. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor stepped out of the treatment room and walked toward them. Are you the one who brought her in? He asked, looking at Danny. Yes, how is she? The doctor gave him a reassuring smile. She had a deep cut on her head, but we managed to stop the bleeding and suture the wound. We ran some tests to rule out anything more serious, and luckily there was no skull fracture or major complications. She'll need to rest and remain under observation for a few hours, but she'll be fine. Danny let out a long sigh of relief. Can I see her? Yes, but only for a short time. She's still weak. The player glanced at his wife, who encouraged him with a nod. He followed the doctor down the hospital's white hallways to one of the emergency rooms. As he entered, he saw Julia lying in the hospital bed, her head wrapped in bandages and her expression tired. Despite everything, she managed a faint smile when she saw him approach. You came back, she said weakly. Of course. I had to make sure you were okay. Julia blinked slowly, still recovering from the pain and the shock. Thank you. If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened. Danny smiled sincerely. The important thing is that you're safe now. He didn't want to pressure her with questions about what had happened at the nightclub, so he simply stayed there for a moment, ensuring she was comfortable. A few minutes later, a nurse entered the room, informing him that Julia needed to rest. Before leaving, Danny looked at her one last time. If you need anything, let me know. Julia nodded, grateful. As he stepped out of the hospital, Danny saw his wife waiting for him next to the car, which still had traces of blood on the passenger seat. He sighed. running a hand over his face. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes, she's going to be fine." His wife smiled and hugged him. "Let's go home then. You've done your part tonight." Danny took one last look at the hospital before getting into the car. As he drove home, he felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. That night, he had gone out expecting only to enjoy a concert with his wife. But in the end, he had saved a life.